The report on Robert Spears-Jennings is exactly what you want to hear if you are the Steelers, because this is how a 7th round pick starts turning into a real roster problem for the rest of the room. Mike DeFabo said the Steelers liked what they saw from him and that he is already playing his way onto this team. And that matters because this is not some random fan hype coming out of nowhere. This is a beat writer around the building basically telling you the Steelers are noticing him, and for a long shot rookie safety, that is a huge deal. Spears-Jennings is not walking into Pittsburgh with the cleanest technical profile in the world, and that is fine. If everything was polished, if the coverage eyes were perfect, if the angles were spotless, he would not have been sitting there in the 7th round. The reason you take a swing on a player like this is because the physical traits are loud. 6'1", 205 pounds, long arms, massive hands, and a 4.3 240 at the combine. That is NFL level athleticism. That is the type of profile you do not casually toss away just because the player still needs coaching. And honestly, this is where the Steelers should be excited, because the body is already there, the movement skills are already there, and the special teams background is already there. The technique can come along, the details can get cleaned up, the tackling angles, the route recognition, the patience in space, all of that can be drilled every single day once he is in the building. But that size-speed combo is not something you create in a meeting room. That is why I like this so much for him. He is not trying to make the team just by being a nice story. He has actual tools that fit what the bottom of an NFL roster needs. That last safety spot is not about having the prettiest resume. It is about who can run, who can cover kicks, who can tackle in space, who can bring juice on game day, and who gives you a reason to believe there is more coming later. Spears-Jennings checks those boxes better than people want to admit, and when you compare him to the names he is battling, I do not think this is some impossible mountain. Darnell Savage has the veteran name, but let's be real, this is not Green Bay first-round pick hype anymore. He is on the older side for this battle. The shine has worn off, and if the Steelers are deciding between keeping a veteran who might be closer to the end than the beginning, or keeping a young safety with real movement skills and special teams value, I know which direction makes more sense. Then you have Sebastian Castro, who is a tough player, but he is not close to Spears-Jennings athletically. That is not even hate. That is just the reality of the profile. Castro may be steadier in some areas right now, but Spears gives you more range, more juice, more developmental upside, and a better chance to eventually become something bigger than just a roster filler. That is the whole point. If you are choosing a depth piece, why not choose the one with the higher ceiling, especially when that player already has over 500 college special teams snaps across every unit? That is not some small detail. That is the job description. A 7th round safety has to be willing to do the dirty work, and Spears already has that background. So when the report says he is standing out, that should make Steelers fans pay attention. This is not about crowning him too early. This is about understanding that the path is real, the competition is beatable, and the physical tools give him a chance to force his way into the conversation faster than most late-round rookies ever do, and that is why this report is such a good sign for Spears-Jennings personally. He is not just trying to survive camp anymore. He is giving the Steelers a reason to evaluate the safety room differently. Once a young player with that kind of frame and that kind of speed starts getting noticed, the coaches start picturing roles for him. That is when a late pick stops being a lottery ticket and starts becoming a player you actually have to account for. What makes Spears-Jennings interesting is that he gives Pittsburgh something they always need more of on the back end, and that is pure range with real size behind it. You can never have enough defensive backs who can run, especially in today's NFL, because every offense is trying to stress space, create matchups, and make your slower depth players show up on film in a bad way. That is why I do not look at this like a cute camp battle. I look at this like the Steelers might have found a young safety who can actually change the speed of their special teams units and eventually give them something defensively once the game slows down. His Oklahoma production backs up the idea that he is more than just a workout guy too. In 2024, he had 66 tackles, 5 tackles for loss, 2.5 sacks, an interception, 4 forced fumbles, and 2 fumble recoveries. Those numbers tell you he was around the football and he was not playing scared. He was triggering downhill, creating contact, getting involved behind the line of scrimmage, and making offenses deal with him. Now, does that mean he is some finished product ready to take over an NFL secondary? No, but that is not the conversation. The conversation is whether he can beat out a veteran safety whose best football may already be behind him, and another young safety who does not bring the same athletic ceiling. And to me, That is where Spears-Jennings has a real case. Savage might know more defense today, but if he is not clearly better on defense and he is not giving you the same special teams value, then why are you automatically handing him the advantage? At some point, the Steelers have to stop falling in love with the safer name and start rewarding the player who gives them more long-term value. The bottom of the roster should not be boring. It should be where you stash speed, violence, upside, and players who can make the team better in December than they were in July. Spears-Jennings fits that. Castro is a good football player, but there is a difference between being a good college player and having the type of athletic profile that makes coaches want to keep developing you. Spears is bigger, faster, longer, and if he can put the technical part together, this is not even that complicated. He can be the better depth piece because depth is not just about who understands the playbook first. Depth is about who can step on the field and not look physically overmatched. Depth is about who can survive when injuries hit and the game gets fast. Depth is about who can give you snaps without making the whole defense shrink around him. That is where traits matter. You put Spears-Jennings in an NFL weight room, keep him in meetings with veteran defensive backs, let the coaching staff hammer the details, and suddenly the 7th round label starts looking less important. The Steelers do not need him to be perfect to keep him. They need him to show he is too useful to risk losing. They need him to cover kicks, run down punts, tackle cleanly, show up in preseason, and give them enough defensive flashes to believe the next step is coming. That is a realistic ask for a player like this, and if he is already standing out before camp gets nasty, before the preseason games, before the live tackling, then that is a great sign. Some players only look good in shorts because contact is limited. Spears-Jennings should be the opposite type of evaluation. His best argument should get stronger when contact starts. A big, fast safety with special teams experience should pop even more when the field opens up and the game becomes physical. That is why I am buying the buzz here. This is not just a player with an interesting combine card. This is a player with the right build, the right role, the right competition in front of him, and the right opportunity to make the Steelers keep him. And for a team that has spent years trying to patch special teams and secondary depth with veterans and fringe pieces, finding a young athlete who can help both areas at the same time is exactly the kind of cheap roster win every good team needs. The best part about this whole Spears-Jennings situation is that his role does not have to be forced. That is usually where people mess up with late round rookies. They either overhype them like they're about to become a starter in week 1, or they dismiss them like they cannot help at all because they were drafted late. The truth is right in the middle, and that middle ground is still exciting. Spears-Jennings can be a really good depth piece right away if the Steelers let the athleticism work for him while the technique catches up. That is the correct way to develop a player like this. Let him run, let him cover kicks, let him chase returners, let him play in space, let him use that frame, that stride, and that closing ability to make an impact where the reads are simpler and the job is clear. Then, while he is helping you on game day, keep building the defensive side behind the scenes. That is how you get value from a 7th round pick. You do not need to rush him into a role he is not ready for, but you also do not hide him if he is already one of the better athletes in the room. That is what makes the Savage and Castro battle so interesting. Savage is the known name, but name value does not cover kicks for you. Name value does not suddenly make a veteran younger. Name value does not give you 4.32 speed. Again, if he's not clearly better, the Steelers should not be afraid to move on. Castro brings toughness, but Spears-Jennings brings a higher-end physical toolbox, and in a league where one missed tackle or one slow angle can flip field position, I am leaning toward the player who gives you more explosion and more room to grow, and this is not some blind athleticism argument either. The guy played a ton of special teams in college, produced on defense, forced turnovers, and now he is already getting positive buzz from people watching the Steelers up close. That is the formula. The only thing left is for him to keep stacking days and tighten up the technical stuff. If he starts seeing route combinations quicker, if his pursuit angles get cleaner, if he becomes more controlled when he arrives at the ball, then the Steelers might have something way better than a 7th round emergency safety. They might have a young player who dresses every week, makes their coverage units faster, protects them against injuries, and gives the secondary a developmental piece with actual upside. Those are the players that quietly make a roster stronger. Not every depth guy has to be some household name. Sometimes the smart move is finding a player with traits before the rest of the league realizes what he could become. Spears-Jennings is on that track right now. The report says he's already making an impression, and that is the part Steelers fans should care about most. The physical traits were already there when he got drafted. The question was whether the football side would start catching up fast enough to matter. Well, if the Steelers are already liking what they see, that is the first sign that it might be happening. He does not need to become a superstar overnight, He just needs to make it impossible for them to cut him. And with Savage looking more like a veteran stopgap than a must-keep piece, and Castro lacking the same athletic upside, Spears-Jennings has a real lane. I would rather keep the young, fast, long safety who can help on special teams today and maybe grow into defensive snaps tomorrow than keep a player just because the depth chart looked that way in June. That is how good teams steal roster value. They identify the traits, coach up the weaknesses, and trust the player who is trending up. Right now, Spears-Jennings is trending up. For a 7th-round rookie, that is all you can ask for. And for the Steelers, it could end up being one of those quiet camp wins that looks a lot smarter once the season gets rolling. That is the kind of player you bet on at the back end of a roster because the risk is small, the athletic upside is obvious on film, and the payoff could be a legit contributor who makes the team younger, faster, and harder to cut down.